We have Daniel Lanois with us today for the first cut. Daniel has produced so many great records, some of my all-time faves. The Joshua Tree by U2, just to name one. Wrecking Ball by Emmylou Harris, another. Time Out of Mind from Bob Dylan. All absolutely brilliant works of art and music are just incredible. So it's a real honor to have you here today, Daniel, and thank you for joining us. Plus, you have a new single out, I just saw, Under the Heavy Sun.
Yes, we're very excited about this current body of work. Under the Heavy Sun is our first single. And then we got a batch of other songs to follow that in the new year. So we're all pretty excited. Thanks for mentioning.
Yeah. So you were recording this right before the pandemic hit.
Yeah, luckily we got most of the record done before the pandemic. But we touched up some of the vocals even after the coming of the pandemic. But I have a studio in my own house, and so we didn't have to go to public places to finish up the work. Yeah. But we're all good now, everybody's staying home, and we get to talk to you. Is that a kitty cat you've got in your
It is a kitty cat, yes. This is I'll just show it real quick. This is Boo.
Hey, Boo.
He's an Abyssinian mix.
How about that? Yeah.
She's very playful, and she'll probably pop in and out occasionally.
Yeah.
So our first question is, what was the first record you fell in love with?
You mean as a child?
Sure. The very first one that you heard that you were like, just loved.
The first record I bought was a 45 by the Surfaris, and that was Wipeout. And the B-side was a song called Surfer Joe. And I just love the energy of the surf music at the time. So that was the beginning. My mom had a couple of records at home. There was a Sarah Vaughan record and I think a Frank Sinatra record. And so we didn't have a vast library, but I loved the few things that I had.
Yeah. Had you been listening to many instrumentals before the Surfaris came along?
I guess there was a little bit of an instrumental music craze or movement at the time. I also liked Sleepwalk by Santo and Johnny, and still one of my favorites today. But probably one of the songs that's been licensed a lot for film. And then shortly after that, I remember Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass. That was all instrument. So nice. There was something about I think they might have been serving the cocktail generation a little bit, like the fabulous lifestyles that were available to folks at that time, the coming of the space age and all that. So, and maybe instrumental music has made a comeback, but if not on radio, then maybe in people's homes. I've heard said that people are gravitating to nice piano records these days. So I might make a piano record myself.
What was your first instrument that you played?
My first instrument was a little plastic penny whistle. It was a little recorder that I bought for $1. I'd seen someone play a clarinet on television, and I thought, I'd love to play the clarinet. And I couldn't afford a clarinet, but I saw that penny whistle in the window of the store, and it was plastic. That hurt me a little bit, but it was only $1, and I played that little whistle for a long time. I loved it.
What instrument were you first trained on, or were you did you ever go through formal training?
I sure did. Shortly after the penny whistle explosion, a man knocked on my mom's door and he said, "Do you have any kids that like music?" Because we're offering music lessons in town. And she said, "Yeah, that one over there, he likes music." And having passed the aptitude test, they said, "Okay, 2 choices, accordion or slide guitar." And I took slide guitar, and that was the beginning of my study.
Now, were your parents instrumentalists or musicians?
Singers on my mom's side. And on my dad's side, my grandfather was a good violinist. He was, we're French Canadian, so he was the violoneux of the family. My dad played a little bit as well. So the there was a lot of hooting and hollering at, in family and neighborhood gatherings, and people playing the violin and the piano and doing those old fashioned, kind of like a tap dancing 2 steps with the old folks with their trousers up around their shoulders, with suspenders and all that. So I caught the tail end of that beautiful Quebec culture.
You have a brother, don't you? Brother musician too, or?
Yeah, my brother, we came up together in the recording studio. I started a recording studio with him, and we ran that for a good 15 years in Canada, and that was the beginning of my footing in the record business.
What was the first album you recorded?
Well, I recorded gospel records when I was just getting started. We hooked up with a Christian music association, and they brought groups in from all over the world, usually singing quartets. And the process was you make a record in 2 days, and then they went on with their touring across Canada. And so I really learned a lot about the four vocal parts from recording these bands. I made a lot of gospel records as a kid.
How did you get into gospel music? Were you raised in a religious household, or was it?
Well, I came up Catholic, and I served at the altar, served as an altar boy, but that's not the reason that I got into it. It was just an off chance that we met someone who was already involved with gospel music in Canada. They were called the Torchmen, a fellow by the name of Mike Moran, and he kept bringing projects to me, and we were just in the basement of my mother's house at that time. So it was not so much an interest in the specifics of gospel music. It's just what came my way as a recording projects, and I just loved the harmonies, and I didn't think of it at the time, but looking back, as a very big part of my education with the understanding of interplay of harmonies.
Mm-hmm. What was the first song you learned on an instrument?
I learned some American classic folk songs, things like "Please Come Back to the Red River Valley. Please come back to a heart that is true." Play little tunes, a little brown jug, don't I love thee. Beautiful melodies, really, that were related to hymns. And then later on, when I worked in Ireland, I realized what a connection there was to those early melodies that I learned to play. My music teacher strummed the chords, and I played the melodies on the slide guitar, single note. It was very, I liked them all, and I still love those little tunes today.
Do you still play the slide guitar every once in a while?
I played the slide guitar a lot. The slide guitar I first learned on was really just an acoustic 6-string guitar with high action. And then a few years later, I picked up the pedal steel guitar. It's the same type of instrument where the pedals alter the pitch of the strings. So you can, raise a major third to a suspended 4, that kind of thing. And 2 pedals down gives you an A chord from an E chord, that sort of thing. And so I'm still a devoted steel guitar player.
Mm-hmm. What was the first heartache song that you really connected with?
There was a radio song at the time by a Canadian artist named Paul Anka. You're so young and I'm so old. This, my darling, I've been told. But you and I will be as free as the birds up in the tree. Please, please be mine, Diana. Diana. And it's quite a brave thing to say. You're so young and I'm so old.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying a lot these days.
Yeah, right. Might not fly as well today, but yes, back then, for sure. Who was the first artist that you idolized or, became like just really enamored with their sound and who they were? And
Well, I went from being a lover of Motown music. I lived in Hamilton, which is near Buffalo on the Canadian side, and then Detroit, a couple of hours away. So we had a lot of soul music radio to listen to. So I heard a lot of the greats, and I heard some touring acts. James Cotton came through town, to give you an example. But then as a guitar player, I fell in love with Jimi Hendrix, and I became a very big fan of Jimmy, and that kind of paved the way for me to more adventurous music, because his guitar playing aside, the records were very far out by comparison to some other things at the time.
Did you ever get to see him live?
I never saw Jimi Hendrix live, I'm sad to say. But I did hear Sly The Family Stone down the hill from my mom's house. It was some bizarre promotion of a show, and I couldn't believe it happened. And so I went down the hill and I stood in front of Sly and The Family Stone as a young teenager. And it really changed my life just to be, and the stage was about a foot high. It was just like some thrown together show in a community hall, a concrete floor, and so I was able to be in the presence of that kind of excellence at such a tender age. So that was a big moment for me.
You said it changed your life. How?
It made me realize that there were other dimensions of music to be found in other cultures. We didn't have that music in our neighborhoods. We had good folk music, and we are renowned for good lyrics and poetry in Canada, but maybe not that kind of soul music. So it made me want to travel. It made me want to go to the sources of that great music.
Where was the first place you went in search of that?
At that age, I didn't travel too much. So I just, whenever there was a touring band coming through Hamilton or Toronto, I tried to catch that. I heard a little later I was playing in club bands, and we played a club called the Brown Derby, and just around the corner was Le Coq d'Or. And that's where I heard Muddy Waters and some of the blues greats. And that really rocked my soul. And then when I got to travel later, I made my way south to New Orleans, because I wanted to be in the place where a lot of my favorite music had come from.
And you ended up producing the album Yellow Moon by the Neville Brothers, which is a classic. How did you end up meeting them? How did that end up coming about?
I went to New Orleans to get away from everything, because at that point I had been in the hot seat for a good few years and had a few hits on the radio for records I'd produced. And I thought, well, in a quiet way, I'll sneak down to New Orleans. I rented a little apartment. There was no telephone, and I minded my own business, and I started writing my own songs. But then the word got out that I was in town, and somebody put two and two together, and they said, well, would you meet with the Neville Brothers with the view of making a record with them? And I agreed. And we did some demos and went well. And that was it. It exposed me to a whole other dimension of Southern music. A very musical family, as you know.
Yeah.
And so I was able to, and we dug up a lot of old tapes from people's closets, and I heard some early meters, rehearsal tapes and demos. So I got to hear where a lot of that sound came from. The beginning of funk, really, the birth of funk came out of there, partly.
What was the first album you produced?
Well, because I started as a kid, I didn't know what a producer was, and I was just helpful to people. And so the gospel records, for example, that we already talked about, I don't think I'm credited as the producer, because I didn't know that I should be called that. I just helped people, and eventually I got called that formally. But I produced a lot of records in Canada before I went to international work. One of the records that I made was with a band called the Parachute Club. They're a Canadian band. and we had a hit called Rise Up from that. So that's one of the first Canadian records I produced. But I engineered, I was just the guy that came with the studio, and I never thought of calling myself a producer. Someone else called me that. And then they said, well, you can make money. Oh, you can make money producing? Okay.
How were you making money before that? I mean, I know you were working in the studio and stuff, but was that how you were making your living solely, or?
Yeah, we charge for the studio. I think $60 a day is what we charge for the recording studio, and I came with that. But I was always a working musician at that time. I played in local bands and I played in pit orchestras, including the pit orchestra for certain plays that were coming up at the time. Plays like Godspell and Hair, and so I was kind of a jack of all trades. I played the guitar. I had a synthesizer, so I could, a little Moog synthesizer. So I was able to provide some far out sounds that people really appreciated, and so I kind of they got hooked on my services. I also played in a big band in our area with my best friend at the time, Bob Deutsch, and it was kind of you might say, a wedding band. You get a book of 600 songs, and the band leader would say 2, 17, 404, and 599, and you quickly go through and then it was just written music, and so and somebody counted in, and off we'd go, and so it was very good for sight reading. I don't do that anymore, but I liked it at the time. It was a very big part of my education, just to be put on the spot. You got to deliver.
Yes, you do. What was the first name of the band, the first band, the name of the first band that you played with?
As kids, we had a band called The Incursion. That's what it said on the side of a white van, The Incursion. And we teased our hair. And we rock and rolled around town, and we'd play big stops like the Kiwanis Boys Club, or the YMCA. And we had a lot of fun, just rock and rolling around the city and traveling around in a van. Our manager had a fabric store. And so when it came time to have matching outfits, he said, well, come in and pick out some fabric. And we did. We picked out a bolt of a paisley pattern fabric. And then Bob Deutsch, the bass player, said, okay, I think I know how to make the outfit. So he laid the fabric on the floor, and then we laid down on top of the fabric, and you go around with a pair of scissors. And the necklines weren't very good.
Yeah, right. And everybody was in paisley, the whole band.
Yeah, and matching paisley. That's right. My. They looked like they were really looking like pajamas, if the truth be known. But it qualified as rock and roll in our imaginations.
Oh, love it. What record are you listening to now that you're really loving?
I've been listening to contemporary Jamaican music in my Crown Vic. I have a police car, a black Crown Vic, and it came with a pretty good radio. And I just so the last month or so, I've been dialing in this Jamaican state. It's really a hip hop station, but they have a Jamaican slot of programming, and a lot of it I'm not recognizing because I know Jamaican music from back in the day, but this is a whole new level of it. And so I've really been enjoying the mystery of it and not knowing exactly what it is. But I go back to some classics. I to this day, I still like Bossa Nova by Stan Getz for a romantic night.
Mm-hmm. What's a heartache song you would go to now?
Oh, geez.
And it doesn't have to be a current one necessarily, but just something that would still maybe really speak to you.
I go out walking after midnight searching for you. The idea that, and I went through this myself as a young man in love with a girl, and I'd be on the street corner looking at her window and walking after midnight. So I know the feeling.
Are we talking about Patsy Cline's version or somebody else's?
Patsy Cline, yeah, that might be the best one, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
just an incredible voice. Yeah. What's a song that really lifts you up right now?
um, well, I'm enjoying some of the what's come out of the oven recently in my own shop. You know, the um, we have a song called "Power," and it has so much joy in it. And we have four singers in this band, Heavy Sun, and Johnny Shepherd takes the lead on this one. Talks about um, the resourcefulness of people and the capacity that we have to get to that place of joy and how the power of joy really and the embracement of it, that it lives. It's not happiness, it's joy. It's a place that we get to. Um, it's quite an accomplishment to get to that place where you can be thankful for what you have and be proactive in your personal life, and which is probably the best form of protest. Is just lead your life the way you think you want to, and should that set an example to someone else, then that might be the best thing we can do right now. So um, and we might release that song as a single in the new year.
I
So keep
hope you
an eye
do.
out for Power, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. It's a very very good grooves. Speaking of southern grooves, it's got a little bit of that great drumming from my friend Brian Blade, a southern drummer, one of the greats, and so we're pretty proud of it. In these pandemic times and these times of question, it's nice to bring out a song that has joy in its core and has thankfulness in its core.
Well, I can't wait to hear it. And this has been great. Thank you so much, Daniel, for giving us your time today. And it's great to talk with you.
Hey, Laura, I appreciate your interest in my work, and you're a bright light, and it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Take care.